So we are here again for our interviews with Urgyen Sangharakshita, and we're meeting in these very beautiful gardens which surround the Madhyamaloka Buddhist Center in Birmingham in the United Kingdom. Over here we have the flat where Urgyen Sangharakshita himself lives, and behind me you'll see the community and retreat center where small conferences are held and seminars on Buddhism and other such topics. And we'll be going inside shortly to meet with Urgyen Sangharakshita and with Dhammachari Maitriveer Nagarjuna, who will be conducting our third and last interview with this very important Buddhist figure.
Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning, Maitriveer Nagarjuna. A nice long name.
Subhuti gave me a long name. Bhante, we are in third and final session now. Is concerned with the more issues we are facing today in India and in Buddhist world in general, Bhante, this morning. So I would like to ask you, Bhante, we see the progress of ex-untouchables and followers of Dr Ambedkar's, those who are following his path, even among non-untouchables and certain OBC people as well. So after his Buddhist conversion, so they have grown considerably in their materialistic standards. Is that enough, Bhante? What is the relationship between materialistic development and Dhamma development?
Well, material development is not enough really for any human being. There must be cultural development and there must be spiritual development.
But it seems that people understood the growth means materialistic growth, and they doesn't seems to be inspired by the Dhamma or the spiritual path.
Well, it's much the same in the West. People usually are very concerned with their material development, with a higher standard of living, a better quality of life, and so on. And very often that doesn't include a recognition of spiritual values. I don't think we should be too surprised by that.
Why materialistic development is not enough, Bhante?
Because human beings are capable of something more and something better. And it's therefore a question of fulfilling the whole human potential, not just a small part of it or a relatively small part of it.
So how we can address, because we see the process of emerging of Buddhist middle class in India and in general in the world?
Well, we have to carry on practicing and teaching the Dharma whenever we got an opportunity. There's no shortcut. There's no magic panacea. I mean, as in fact I said the other day, no magic bullet. You can't compel people. You can only try to persuade them, try to point out that there is something more in life, something better, something greater than material enjoyment, material prosperity. Important though that undoubtedly is.
So greater meaning becomes a materialistic greatness than the spiritual greatness for most of the people. Much greater in life, in their view, is materialistic growth.
Well, as I said, that's the view of most people all over the world. Their real philosophy, regardless of their avowed philosophy or religion, they are concerned with material things, material issues. So we have to recognize that, and recognize that the number of those who are interested in more spiritual things is always going to be a minority. But nonetheless we have to carry on working as best we can to enlarge that minority, so that at the very least the surrounding society, however materialistic may be, at least does allow some space for the practice and the development of spiritual values. And of course in some countries in the world materialistic values are propagated very vigorously in such a way as to make it more difficult to practice and teach the Dharma. But we have to keep on trying.
Bhante, I have been in UK since 2.5 weeks. So I have experienced the great deal of materialistic comforts. I have been very well taken care of. And I'm seeing, as compared to India, the standard of living and food quality and everything is much better in the West. So I wonder, Bhante, how that is compatible with the Dhamma life.
Well, of course, there are many people in India also who are enjoying a high standard of living. In some cases to a quite extreme extent. And as you say, the middle class there is rapidly increasing. But I certainly do think it important that whether in the East or whether it's in the West, we should, as Buddhists, try to lead as simple a life as possible, and not take too large a share of the resources of the world, a share more than we're really entitled to. As population of the world is going up, food production, it seems, is not going up, and there are going to be problems later on. And I think people in the West are going to have to learn to live more simply, whether they like it or not. But as Buddhists in the West, I think we should try to live simply. Of course, simply is a relative term.
Yes.
One person's simple way of life is another person's well-to-do way of life, or even luxurious way of life. But certainly our intention as Buddhists and as Western Buddhists should be to live as simply as possible, making as few demands on the environment as possible. So that is something I have been emphasizing for some years, here in this country and in Europe and America, that Western Buddhists should try to live simply.
I would like to ask something more on simplicity, Bhante. In India, poverty is a big problem, and they are in difficult situation. So when we say try to live a simple life, it sort of becomes an excuse for them to be more, or to be remain like that. And they think
it depends who one is speaking to. I can remember in my very early days in India. I used to address audiences of newly converted Buddhists, and I had many meetings in the chauls in Worli, and the meetings used to be held in the corridors at night, late, and I could see that most of the people present didn't even have proper clothes, and that they were leading very hard and difficult lives. I certainly would not have asked them to live more simply. Yes, but had I been addressing, say, a well-to-do Hindu audience, as I sometimes did, I would certainly advise them to live more simply, and share more with other people and practice generosity. So we should also always be sensitive to the kind of audience that we are addressing. So here in the West, in our Triratna Buddhist community, people are mostly living a more or less ordinary middle-class life, so far as material comforts and so on are concerned, though a few are living more simply than that. So here, therefore, I emphasize living more simply.
So what will the term simple will carry for the people who are in difficult situation, Bhante?
Well, you shouldn't use the word to them. Huh? You should encourage them to strive for better education, better jobs.
That's the paradox, Bhante. If we encourage them to have a good job and to be a good life, better life, they fall in the trap of consumerism. So how to draw a line between their spiritual life and for their better standard of living?
Well, one has to explain as well as one can that in just having a higher standard of living and having a middle-class sort of life, they're not truly fulfilling their human potential. And if one wants to quote Dr Ambedkar, one can certainly do that and say, well, Baba Sahib didn't want you just to be like middle-class Hindus. He wanted you to be something much better than that. He wanted you to be practicing Buddhists in the full sense of the term. And that's why he inaugurated the great mass conversion. So if you simply remained at the materialistic, middle-class level, you'd be letting down Dr Ambedkar and betraying his legacy.
Another complementary problem with this, Bhante, people may understand his conversion into his socio-political struggle and getting a political power and becoming a materialistic well-being is the fulfilling of his dream. Would you please say something on that, Bhante?
Well, in India, as in Britain, every person is a citizen, everybody has a vote. So to that extent at least they participate in politics. And of course in a democracy, in party politics, a particular party tries to win power so as to implement its particular program. Of course, I don't think you can really spread Buddhism by purely political means. I know some people talk of what they may do if they become Prime Minister and all that sort of thing, but that is really not the way. The most we can expect from the state, that it gives us space, it gives us room to practice and to teach the Dharma. We don't expect the state to be responsible for the revival of Buddhism or for the spread of the Dharma. The state, as it were, holds the ring between the different communities, including the different religious communities. So it wouldn't be right to try to seize political power in such a way that you would thereafter favour Buddhism because of your political power. That would not be right. I mean, here in this country, in England, where, as you know, we have a democratic constitution, imperfect though that may be, I do encourage people, if they feel so inclined, to take part in local politics, on the ground level, as it were. And I do know that one or two people at least have done that quite successfully. For instance, there was a Mitra who became the mayor of Cambridge. So he was in a position as mayor, if necessary, to speak up on behalf of Buddhist interests. but he certainly would not have been in a position to take unfair advantage, of the fact that he was mayor. That wouldn't be in accordance with the Dharma. But the idea that one should aim at political power so that one can spread the Dharma, I think that's an illusion. Through political power you can leave more space for the Dharma, as it were, and make sure that those who practice the Dharma are not discriminated against, that they enjoy their rights as citizens, including the right to freedom of religion, but that's all one could really do.
They cite a legacy of great Ashoka, because he was in a political power.
Yes.
He could able to spread the Dharma, and that's how they understood the meaning of Dharma Bhante in such situation.
Well, these are changed times. Ashoka was an autocratic ruler. We don't encourage autocratic rulers these days. We call them dictators. So I very much doubt whether there is any chance of a dictator arising in India, whether Buddhist or otherwise. Well, to the extent that India is a democracy, I hope that there never is a dictatorship.
Bhante, I will just move forward in Buddhist world in India. You are aware of caste situation, Bhante, in India, and there are few non-Ambedkarite Buddhists, those who didn't convert with Dr. Ambedkar, and some of them say that a separate approach for Dhamma is needed for them. Do you agree with this, Bhante?
I'm not sure what they mean by a separate approach.
They think, Bhante, that there is too much emphasis on Dr. Ambedkar. So can we have a Buddhism in India without Dr. Ambedkar?
Well, Dr. Ambedkar is there, and he is part of the historical process, and he played such an important part in the revival of Buddhism in India. So no one can deny that or refuse to recognize that. But there may be differences of opinion as to the degree of importance of Dr. Ambedkar. And I do know that certain communities, not followers of Dr. Ambedkar, have their own highly respected spiritual leaders in the past, whom they respect, just as Dr. Ambedkar respected Kabir, for instance. So they will clearly not give so much importance to Dr. Ambedkar as those who are his actual followers.
But Dr. Ambedkar emphasized, Bhante, Buddhism became a means to emancipate from the social divisions and caste. So sometimes it misses the point when we apply Buddhism as an applied philosophy for social transformation without Dr. Ambedkar.
Well, there were social reformers before Dr. Ambedkar, but his genius and his contribution consisted in the fact that it was he who saw that it would be possible for his people to get away from the caste system only by leaving Hinduism, because he rightly saw the caste system as an integral part of Hinduism. So I think even those other communities also who are at present Hindu or were Hindu also see the importance of leaving Hinduism if they want to leave the caste system. So to that extent, of course, whether they recognize it or not, they are following in the footsteps of Dr. Ambedkar.
So will it not fall into a sort of two divergence, Bhante? One Buddhism with Dr. Ambedkar and one Buddhism without Dr. Ambedkar?
That may be the case. That may happen.
So it seems a little bit paradoxical situation.
No, I don't see it as paradoxical at all. I'm not surprised that there should be such a situation.
So then Buddhism in one form will remain with the question of caste as it is, and another form of Buddhism will try to be more assertive to get rid of caste. Will it not happen, Bhante, in that case?
Well, I think all those who are concerned with Buddhism or wanting to become Buddhists in India, that is to say those who are Hindu, will have to recognize that if they do want to be free from the caste system, well, they have to leave Hinduism. There can be no compromise about that. Whether they're followers of Dr. Ambedkar or followers of anybody else.
So it will be important, Bhante, for them to living Hinduism and rejecting caste.
Yes, well, as I said, anyone in India who is or was Hindu of whatever caste has to recognize that if they want to get out of the caste system, they have to get out of Hinduism itself. And Dr. Ambedkar's genius and his distinctive contribution was in seeing that and putting it in motion among his own followers. When he himself renounced Hinduism and publicly embraced Buddhism. And in fact, I'd go a little further than that. There were the 22 vows or pratignas, weren't there?
Yeah.
Which Dr. Ambedkar repeated, and many of his followers repeated. And when I was in India years ago, I was very much in favor of keeping these vows, because they made it quite explicit that in embracing Buddhism, one automatically rejected Hinduism and rejected not only the caste system, but the worship of the Hindu deities. So I do know that later the 22 vows were dropped by many people, but I think they did form a very important line of demarcation between those who actually became Buddhists and those who just had some vague sympathy with Buddhism but remained Hindus.
And how do you think, Bhante, that supplementation of 22 pratignas, vows, is significant for the Buddhism in India?
Well, whether you actually repeat those vows or not, you have to recognize that if you want to be a Buddhist, you cannot be a Hindu at the same time. And that one became a Buddhist in India in order to escape from Hinduism, because she wanted to escape, from the caste system. So whether you repeat the pratignas or not, once you become a Buddhist, well, you stop worshipping the Hindu gods and goddesses, as well as you stop observing the caste system. And of course, I remember, years ago when I was in India, sometimes people literally threw out the Hindu gods from their own houses or their own small temples, because they weren't usually admitted into the Hindu temples run by the caste Hindus, but they did have their own Hindu gods, and very often they did literally sort of throw them out. Sometimes throwing them into the river.
And Bhante Baba Sahib made very clear that I won't worship Buddha as a 9th incarnation of Vishnu in 22 vows. But still, while this parallel twofold Buddhism in India, they consider Buddha as an incarnation of Vishnu.
Well, if you consider the Buddha as an incarnation of Vishnu to that extent, you're not a Buddhist. To that extent, you're a Hindu. I don't see how a Buddhist can possibly recognize the Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu. I mean, how can a Buddhist believe in Vishnu in the Hindu sense? So we have to be quite clear about that if people ask us questions.
But Buddhism believe in rebirth, Bhante, and they relate the phenomena or concept of Buddhist rebirth with the incarnation of Vishnu very easily, which is very confusing for the Buddhist in India.
No, in the case of Vishnu, it's not a rebirth, it's called an avatar, a descent. So the question of the descent, the question of the Buddha being recognized as an incarnation of Vishnu is quite separate from the question of rebirth in the ordinary sense.
So what will be the guidelines, Bhante, to make these 2 points very clear for the people?
Well, make those points whenever you have an opportunity. As with regard to so many other points, regarding the Dharma. And of course, one thing I've noticed, here in the West even, that one has to go on repeating things. It's not enough to tell people something once. You have to tell them 20 times before it will really sink in. I sometimes quote Winston Churchill in this connection. He was a very famous orator, famous speaker. And he said, I always say everything 3 times. I tell people what I'm going to say, then I say it, and then I tell them what I've said. Because he recognized that, well, repetition is important. If something is to be driven home, to sink in. And that's why in the Pali scriptures we find lots of repetitions.
3 times.
Again and again. Because the Buddha recognized that, well, he had to hammer home certain points because they were so opposed to the ordinary human way of thinking and behaving. So in this case also, we just have to keep on repeating our position as Buddhists and making it clear, what the Dharma really does teach, and what we should be practicing, what we should be observing. I mean, I've discussed and argued with Hindus dozens of times about, well, I could even say hundreds of times about, the Buddha being or not being, the avatar of Vishnu. And I expect that if I was to visit India again and to meet caste Hindus, I would still have to be telling them the same thing. Yes, so yes, what does the Dhamma say? Non-repetition is the decay of the scriptures. So non-repetition of the Dharma leads to the decay of the Dharma. We have to keep on reminding people.
Bhante, when we practice Buddhism, so as you said, we have to be clear whether we are Buddhist or Hindu. We can't be both at the one time. So on certain socio-political issues, they mix Buddhism with Hinduism. But when it comes to the level of which religion you belong to, for example, they blame Buddhists that they are spreading disharmony among society by going against our great tradition and Indian tradition and Hindu traditions. So
well, what could spread the disharmony more than the caste system? So one has to tell them that. But if there are common interests between Buddhists and Hindus, I mean, they can share a common social platform on certain issues, but that doesn't mean that Buddhists cease to be Buddhists for that reason, any more than Hindus would cease to be Hindus for that reason. I mean, for instance, supposing the government has a scheme to develop something near your village, And both, I mean, the Hindus and the Buddhists of that village don't like the idea. So they can certainly join together in petitioning the government not to carry out that particular program. That wouldn't compromise their Buddhism. Because they are citizens with the rights of citizens as well as Buddhists.
And Bhante, we heard you gave a talk to Vishwa Hindu Parishad once when you were in India.
Yes.
Would you please share some memories how you address a Hindu people from that platform, Bhante, when they invited you?
Yes, that was in, I think it was in Nagpur. So yes, when I was in India, I always accepted invitations to speak on the Dharma, whoever asked me, whether it was Buddhists or Hindus or Parsis or Sikhs, that was always my principle. And well, I on one occasion I gave a lecture on Buddhism to the RSS. That was in Pune. I think they had not their headquarters, but
one of the influential.
Yes. So that has always been my principle. And also here in the West, after I arrived in this country from India, I got many invitations from Theosophists and Christians of various kinds, and I always accepted those and took the opportunity of explaining the Dharma as best I could. So in the case of Hindu Vishwa Parishad, well, there was no exception. They welcomed me very kindly, and I spoke my mind. I can't remember what I said, because I gave so many hundreds of lectures at that time. But I had a good audience, about 400 people came.
So have you not encountered with these problems, Bhante, while interacting with them or speaking with them? Or they might have asked you question to you, mixing Buddhism with Hinduism?
I mean, I always experienced that if I discussed Buddhism with Hindus, or if I spoke to a Hindu audience, they would always ask very cunning questions. They would try to trap me into saying something I did not want to say. And they were never able to trap me in that way.
And how did you deal with that situation, Bhante?
Well, I can only say in general terms that I dealt with it in accordance with the Dharma. And some people used to say that Sangharakshita is very quick-witted. He is a typical Englishman. Yes.
But for you, Bhante, it's a good excuse for them that you are being an English man. But if any Indian will defend them, they mix it with a Dharma, it's quite easy for them to confuse them.
Well, I don't think that Indians are so unintelligent as that. I think the Buddhists are at least as intelligent as the Hindus. In fact, I mentioned, I think yesterday, that I discovered or realized that even people who were not literate were still very intelligent. So I'm sure there's no lack of intelligence among the Indian Buddhist community. But yes, caste Hindus, especially Brahmins, can be very clever in answering questions. So you should engage in discussion with them only if you're quite sure of your ground and if you know what you're talking about and are able to deal with difficult questions. Otherwise, stay away from them.
Coming back to 22 vows, Bhante, as you rightly said, we need a sort of clear departing point from Hinduism. So it's important for Buddhism in whole world, I feel. So we don't observe such points or like 22 vows, 22 pratijnas in the West. So would it be good idea, Bhante, something like that, don't you feel?
I did raise this question some years ago.
Yes,
I did say I thought it might be a good idea to have something like the 22 vows in the West in relation to Christianity. But I eventually thought, well, it's not really necessary. English Buddhists, for the most part, are very clear about this. In the early days of Buddhism in Britain, there was a very big question always of, well, whether there was a God in Buddhism or not. But I think that has more or less been cleared up by this time. And I don't think, well, I certainly hope that no member of our own order is confused on this issue. In fact, most people are very aware, you know, looking at things from a psychological point of view, very aware that they carry over from their previous culture certain definite conditionings which are not in accordance with Buddhism. And they're very conscious that these have to be worked on. And sometimes these conditions or conditionings are of a religious nature, some of a different kinds, they're purely psychological ones. But people on the whole, within the order at least, and many mitras, are very conscious of the fact that we carry with us into Buddhism various conditionings that we need to carry on working on. They're quite clear about this in most cases.
But still sometimes I'm not very much aware about the Buddhism in the West, Bhante. But from the news or some of my experiences also tells me that they are mixing Buddhism with some fantasies or hallucination effect and sexual energy and creative energy inside you, and they mix with the divinity and so on. So still well, I feel, Bhante, it would be a great idea if we can have something like 22 pratidhyas in this Western or American culture.
I think you'd need many more than 22. You'd have to have 2200, because there are so many currents, you know, in the modern West and in the realm of psychology and therapy. And these are constantly impinging upon people. And they have to sort them out, because different people have you know, different conditionings in their background, or even in the present environment. So just to draw up a list of Hindu deities that one shouldn't worship, that's pretty simple. But to draw up a list of all sorts of practices and ideas you shouldn't get involved with as a Buddhist, well, we need a small encyclopedia, so it's not really practical. And of course every now and then a new fashionable idea comes up, but my experience is it doesn't last for long, it dies away after a time. And of course one needs to carry on one's study and practice of the Dharma, that's the main thing, to be clear in one's thinking. But to be clear in one's thinking is not so easy.
Well, personally I request, Bhante, that will be great if you could draw certain points in general in the addressing Western Buddhist world, and in fact for the whole Buddhist world.
Well, I've done what I could in various talks and lectures and seminars, and of course in my writings, so you know, people have no doubt as to where I stand.
Yes, Bhante, just would like to go back among the Buddhists who are Ambedkarite and non-Ambedkarite. It's quite delicate issue and very difficult to separate Buddhism with Ambedkar and non-Ambedkar. So can you please, Bhante, say something about your position on this issue?
Well, my position is that whether it's in India or anywhere else, There can't be 2 Buddhisms or 3 Buddhisms or 4 Buddhism. There's only one Dharma. And people may come to it in different ways. But the fact that they come to it in different ways or inspired by different people doesn't mean that they are following different Buddhisms. They're following the one and the same Dharma. So it's the Dharma that unites us. It's the Dharma that we have in common.
So it will give a sort of impression, Bhante, that we are approving whether you accept Ambedkar or not.
Well, the important thing is whether one accepts the Dharma or not. And one certainly can't force people to recognize Dr. Ambedkar in the way that his own followers do. For his own followers, he has a very special place, and that is obviously understandable. But there may be other Buddhists, even Indian Buddhists, who do not give Dr. Ambedkar that same place, but who are nonetheless practicing the Dharma in just the same way that we are practicing it. And that's the important thing. I've said that a dozen times already that yes, in India, if you are a Buddhist or you want to be a Buddhist, the absolute minimum is that well, you reject caste. But of course, it's not enough to be a Buddhist simply to reject caste. There's a lot of other positive things which of course you need to practice. You need to go for refuge sincerely to the 3 jewels, observe the 5 precepts, meditate, study the Dharma. All that is necessary. It's simply not enough to reject the caste system and then think that, well, that's enough, and you are a Buddhist simply by virtue of your rejection of the caste system.
Bhante, we are very much aware of, in modern history, the debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Gandhi was willing to emancipate untouchability, and he was saying that I would love to reborn as an untouchable, but he was very much in favor of Varna Ashrama Dharma, 4 caste system. And Baba Sahib was emphasizing that untouchability is an effect of caste system. So how can we get rid of untouchability by keeping 4 caste system? So most of the non-Ambedkarite or the non-Dalit Buddhist Bhante, they say is a non-violence. Gandhi has said about ahimsa, and he was very much in favor of get rid of untouchability, but they don't seems to be address the caste problem in India. So that's the danger we are facing while keeping Dr. Ambedkar away from the Buddhist world in India.
No, I wouldn't I wouldn't say that that is the case. I think, I mean, if Mahatma Gandhi rejected untouchability, that's good, but that was only a first step. And the next step would be, of course, to reject the caste system itself. And well, if one speaks in terms of Varnashrama Dharma, that is in effect to speak in terms of the caste system, because it would be hereditary. It's not just a sort of occupational division. This is, I think, what Gandhi tries to argue, but in practice it isn't that. It's determined by one's birth, and that is why the Buddha objected to it, and why belief in the caste system or Varnashrama Dharma is incompatible with the acceptance of the Dharma. But you will always have, movements of people who will try to mix Buddhism with something else. We certainly get that in the West. Not within Triratna, I trust, but there are certainly other semi or partly Buddhist movements in the West which do mix Buddhism with various forms of psychotherapy and even sometimes with Christianity. But that is a permanent danger, so far as I'm concerned. Whether it's in India or whether it's anywhere else. But we'll always find some people who are trying to do that sort of thing. And we have to be on our guard against it ourselves and try to, where we have the opportunity, engage those people in discussion.
So just a supplementary question with this, Bhante. How the Buddhists who are non-Dalit and the followers of Dr. Ambedkar can work in a harmony to spread Dharma?
Well, they can work in harmony to spread the Dharma if they have the same understanding of Dharma and the same practice of Dharma. Then they can certainly work together.
What do you mean by same understanding, Bhante?
Well, that they recognize the importance of going for refuge, they recognize the importance of Sila, Samadhi, Prajna, of the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and so on.
And on the question of reincarnation and gods, in fact, because that's the...
Well, as regards God, well, that isn't any part of the Dharma. And as regards rebirth, I don't like the word reincarnation, but as regards rebirth, so far as I understand it, that was part of the Buddha's teaching.
Just I'm moving a bit ahead, Bhante. It's my last few questions. People in India are easily confused with the Mahayana imageries, the use of Mahayana imageries with the Hindu deities. So, how important is to use the Mahayana images? Do we need them, Bhante?
Well, strictly speaking, we don't need, in the absolute sense, any images at all. Because in the early days of Buddhism, the first couple of centuries, there weren't even any images of the Buddha, or to speak images of anybody else. So we certainly have we can practice the Dharma without Mahayana images. There's no doubt about that.
And then, Bhante, how the Buddhist use the images how the Buddhist uses the images different than the Hindu deities or Hindu images?
Well, the Buddhist images are usually of the Mahayana ones, are usually of the Buddha and of various bodhisattvas. And those bodhisattvas are seen as embodiments of different qualities of the Buddha, whether of compassion or wisdom or energy and so on. But I do understand that they are often represented pictorially in much the same way that Hindu images are depicted. So that for ordinary people there could be some confusion. But in any case, as I said, the use of Mahayana images, even Bodhisattva images, is not an essential part of the understanding and practice of the Dharma. In any case, more broadly speaking, the teaching of the Buddha, the Buddha Shakyamuni, is contained in the Pali Canon. And we have to estimate or even judge later historical developments like those of the Mahayana and the Vajrayana in accordance with whether they are in agreement or in harmony with the teaching of the Buddha as we find it in the Pali scriptures.
But essentially, Bhante, the teaching of Mahayana complements to the Pali Canon, besides use of imageries like emptiness with the nirvana or emptiness with the impermanence. So when they use the imageries to spread the teachings, it spreads the confusion as well, or it gives a close chance to spread a confusion.
I don't see that as necessarily happening. because the Mahayana philosophical teachings, or some of them at least, are embodied in, for instance, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And one can certainly study those sutras and try to practice their teaching without any recourse to Mahayana images. So in other words, in a sense, I don't see images as an integral part of Mahayana, even from the standpoint of Mahayana Buddhist philosophy. And some forms of Buddhism in the Far East have not exactly criticized the use of images, even Buddha images, but have seen their limitations.
So do you mean, Bhante, that Buddhists should not use images?
I'm not saying that Buddhists should not use images. I mean, I said that we did not have images even of the Buddha in the early centuries of Buddhism. But if we find that images help us in our practice of the Dharma, well, that's all right. But I mean, some people will be attracted by the worship of the Buddha in the form of an image, and others will not. It's just like in Christianity, we've got the Roman Catholics who do, in a manner of speaking, worship images, and Protestants who don't, who definitely reject them. To some extent it's a matter of temperament. But what is important, of course, is the understanding and practice of the Dharma in the sense of an understanding and practice of its fundamental principles. The question of worshipping or not worshipping images is a quite secondary one.
Still I have some concerns, Bhante. When I went to Bodh Gaya or any Buddhist places, we have seen there are a rich tradition of Tanka paintings in Mahayana, which is quite attractive. And as you said, if the images are helpful for you to practice a Dhamma, we can use them. Same way, they are trying to replicate or sort of copy the style of Tanka painting to Hindu deities. And they say that these images are helpful for us, like Saraswati is a god of knowledge. And if there is a Bodhisattva image on Tanka, which is Prajna, Bodhisattva of Prajna, wisdom, so they mix with that. So here, Bhante, what should be our position, or our like Triratna position, or your position, Bhante, to not mixing?
I would say
confusion, which there is confusion.
I would say keep it simple. As far as possible, keep with Shakyamuni. But if people want to engage with Mahayana Bodhisattvas, and some definitely do, well, that's also in accordance with the Dharma, because those Bodhisattvas are the embodiment of certain qualities or aspects of the enlightenment of Shakyamuni.
So, Bhante, I'm moving a bit ahead again. India once shone with the glory of Buddhist art and culture, and it disappears in the course of history. So do you have any thoughts, Bhante, concerning the importance of creating Buddhist art and culture in order to bring back Buddhism in its native land?
I don't have any specific thoughts, but I think it's inevitable that among those who have converted to Buddhism, there will be those who are interested in or involved with culture in its different forms. I know that there is something in Marathi called Dalit literature, which is a distinctive product of well, the Dalits, including those who have converted to Buddhism, and also there are those who will be illustrating Buddhist magazines with Buddhist images of the Buddha, and so on, and producing paintings of the life of the Buddha. I think all that will happen, and in fact I think it's already going on to some extent, and I think that is to be encouraged. And in fact, just recently in Nagpur, didn't Triratna organize an exhibition of Buddhist arts and culture?
Yeah, Buddha Festival.
Buddha Festival. So I think that was a very good move, and I would encourage developments of that kind. And of course, the same thing is happening, here in this country. We have at least two very fine artists, Chintamani and Aloka, who have produced different versions of the Buddha. In Chintamani's case, actual images, statues, one of them standing, and both have produced, of course, paintings of the Buddha, of the refuge tree, and so on. So this aspect of Triratna and of the Dharma should certainly be developed. Because we find that with every religion is embedded in a culture which reflects its values. So as Triratna, whether in India or in the West, we need an art and a culture which represents our particular take on the Dharma, our particular approach to and understanding of the Dharma. So as I said, it's very much to be encouraged. And I'm sure there's a lot of hidden talent which will gradually manifest itself.
You mentioned, Bhante, art and culture is one of the foundation of Triratna.
I won't say it's one of the foundations. The foundation,
important aspect of
the foundation is the Dharma, but art and culture can be of help to us in our practice of the Dharma.
Do you have any thought, Bhante, how we can encourage that, how to do that?
Well, how does one encourage? One encourages with words of encouragement and appreciation, and also, Buddhist artists have to make a living, so one encourages them by buying their work or commissioning their work. And of course, this does happen in this country. With regard to the two artists that I mentioned, people do commission paintings from them, which helps them, in respect of their livelihood.
Bhante, I have a very close friend of mine in India, who is a very well-known artist called Savi Savarkar, who does work on untouchability, female infanticide, Manu system, and also the series on Zen masters and Vajrasuchi and Ashwaghosha. Undoubtedly, he has a very strong stroke from his brush and very strong expression about untouchability and Devdasi system and so on. But he doesn't get that space in art world, because art is also divided on the grounds of the caste, Bhante, in India. So aesthetics emerging from the Ambedkarite Buddhist movement doesn't seems to be acknowledged to that level in the light of Buddhist philosophy.
Well, we don't need it to be acknowledged or recognized by others outside our own movement. We don't depend on that. We're independent. But I'm sure that if it reaches a certain level of quality, it'll be impossible for the outside world to ignore it.
And another similar problem concerned with this, Bhante, they try to understand the aesthetic values emerging from new Buddhist movement in terms of Hindu philosophy. Most of the art understood generally is the case in India.
Well, they will certainly try to do that, because they will try to assimilate you in one way or another. So again, one has to be on one's guard against that and aware of that. But it's not surprising that they should try to do that. it would be surprising if they didn't try.
Dr. Ambedkar himself has a plan of writing a book on iconography and images, Bhante. So in such situation, how do you feel the importance of Buddhist aesthetics in India?
Well, it's part of culture, part of Buddhist culture, and that culture, that Buddhist culture, I mean, is supportive, you know, of our attempts to practice the Dharma.
Bhante, my last two questions. We see rapid cultural change in India, and there are change in customs and morals. And we are facing, India is facing a transition what Britain experienced in 1960s in terms of morals and sexual relationship and question of marriages and so on. So the youth are thinking differently than the older generation. There is a big gap. So would you please say something on that, Bhante?
Well, I think it's inevitable that there's some difference of opinion and approach between the generations. I mean, I've lived now for nearly 86 years, and I've seen very great changes, you know, in India, and also, for instance, in this country. And I see a decline in respect. For instance, the young don't respect their elders now in this country in a way that we did when I was young. In fact, just to give you an example of that, I was quite shocked, in fact, when I came back to this country, and I found children calling their parents by their first names. This was unthinkable, you know, when I was a child. So at first it gave me a bit of a shock. So there's been all sorts of, you know, differences of that kind, you know, between the generations. So we shouldn't be surprised by that. I don't think there's much we can do about it, but we always have to look at our manners and customs and beliefs, whether of the older generation or the younger generation. As Buddhists, we have to look at them in the light of the Dharma and to see, you know, to what extent they're in accordance with the principles of the Dharma or not.
One private question within the movement, Bhante. It's not for the general public. Indian movement face, especially Triratna movement, Triratna Bauddha Mahasangha, lot of disharmony among the different centers. I wonder how much you are aware of this disharmony. And there is tendency of groupism and fractionalism and so on. So how can we be in more harmony, Bhante, while people are so much caught up with the fractionalism and groupism?
Well, I saw something of that during my last days in India, and that's one of the reasons why I decided it wasn't the right time for me to carry on with my work in India at that time. And well, one can't do anything about this except making as much of a personal effort as possible to restore harmony. It occasionally happens, even in this country, that there are disharmonies and disagreements, very severe ones, between all the members, sometimes carrying on for years, which I myself haven't been able to resolve, people being so obstinate. And I'm not surprised, therefore, that you have the same problem in India. But those who do genuinely believe in the Dharma should make an effort to work together, and also to persuade others, you know, to work together harmoniously. That's all we can do. We can't force anybody. We can only persuade. And of course, sometimes our persuasion doesn't have any effect, but we nonetheless have to carry on.
And another similar problem we are facing, Bhante, among Indian movement, is they are so much caught up with their families and security problems, and that can be completely understand in terms of situation, but it makes very difficult to practice Dhamma. So
well, it's the same here, maybe though to a lesser extent. And in India, of course, traditionally family life is stressed very, very strongly. Not just what we call the nuclear family, but the extended family. And yes, amidst the changing social conditions, there are all sorts of problems arising in this connection. Because in India too, well, one is seeing nuclear families developing. Not just the old traditional, all under one roof sort of family. And of course, one of the features of our Triratna movement is that one can go for refuge and try to practice the Dharma, whatever one's social circumstances. The fact that one has a family and has to earn a living doesn't mean that one can't practice the Dharma. One can practice it, and one should, if one wants to be regarded as a Buddhist or to be a Buddhist. And of course there must be opportunities for people to get, for order members especially, and mitras, to get away from their families and go on retreat. This is of very great importance, and people should give priority to that. Well, as the Buddha said to the Vajis, they should meet together as often as possible and in large numbers. And that's what we do when we have a retreat of one kind or another. But all the problems that you're experiencing are problems that are inherent, one might say, in human nature, and they're not just peculiar to India. We have them here, and other Buddhist groups have them too. But the emphasis must be on the practice of the Dharma, and to the extent that we do sincerely try to practice the Dharma, we will not be involved in factionalism or groupism. It's interesting, we don't have this term groupism in English in the West. It seems to have been coined in India.
Bhante, what is your dearest wish for to see Dhamma in India? Dr. Ambedkar hoped that it should be a Buddhist India. Do you think that is possible?
Well, I think it's possible if Buddhists, the existing Buddhists, work together in harmony and continue that work. I think it's impossible for India or for Hindus, leaving aside the Muslims, any longer to ignore the importance or relevance of Buddhism. In my time, especially in my earlier days, Hindus could afford just to ignore Buddhism because there were so few Buddhists. But they can't afford to ignore them now because there are so many. And I'm sure they must, the Dharma inevitably will influence them more and more, whether they like it or not. So I'm optimistic about the future.
Bhante, thank you very much for your kind time and your compassion, Bhante.
Thank you for your questions.
And what is your message for India, Bhante?
Well, I'm often asked for messages for India and also for other places. And I like to quote Dharma Rinpoche's words. Cherish the Dharma, live united. What's the third one? Radiate love. Yeah. Yes. That's my message.
And we wish you for your good health and longer life, Bhante.
Thank you.
For the Dharma in the world. And I
shall enjoy my longer life better if if our brothers and sisters work together unitedly without quarrelling among themselves.